to the City Planning meeting for the 3rd of August. We have in attendance Alderman Briscoe, Councillor Harvey, Councillor Dutta and Councillor Coates, and also the Director of Planning, Mr Neil Noy, as well as Sarah Avey, who's the Manager of...
Karen.
What did I say?
Sarah.
Oh, Sarah, Karen Avey. Sorry, Karen Avey, who's Manager of Development Appraisal. I welcome Alderman Baracus. We've got quite a large agenda, so we'll get started. So can I have item 1 is co-option of committee members? We don't have any. Can I have item 2 is confirmation of minutes from the last meeting?
So moved, Deputy.
Thank you, Alderman Briscoe. Now we'll go, if there's any dissent, please raise your hand. Councillor Dutta, you're not dissenting? Good. Okay. I declare that carried. Consideration of supplementary items. There is one. Somebody move that, please.
I move.
Thank you, Councillor Dutta. Any dissent? No dissent. That's carried. Indications of pecuniary and conflicts of interest. Do we have any indications of conflict of interest? There are none. Transfer of agenda items. Any transfers? Nope. Item 6 is planning authority items, consideration of items with deputations. Can I have somebody move that, please?
Yeah, I move.
Thank you, Councillor Dutta. No dissent? Okay, so we'll move to those. And we have a number of deputations. We'll start with 7.1.1, 26 Lower Jordan Hill Road. So Craig, if you can invite people in who are deputising there. And we're considering these applications under the Hobart Interim Planning Scheme. Thank you. And so welcome to Stephen Donovan, talking on behalf of Carol Lynch. Yes, thank you. Hi, Carol. And Mr. Luke Chamberlain and Ms. Carolyn Graham from Track Consultants, and Mr. Keith Westbrook, who's the architect for the applicant. So we'll hear from the representatives. And Steve, you have 5 minutes to address the committee, and then we'll have a chance to ask questions. Thank you. Just take yourself off mute, Steve.
Okay, you got me now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, well, yeah, good afternoon. And Carol and Charles Lynch, I'm a relative of Carol's, and she's asked, or they've asked me to speak on their behalf. How should I approach this? I take it you guys have all got a copy of the submissions from the various people? The
Yes.
Representations, I beg your pardon?
We've had a chance to look at the representations and, of course, the report.
Yes.
So if you put forward your particular concerns in the 5 minutes that you have.
Yeah, okay. Well, Carol and Charles are quite concerned, given the topography of the land, the way that it sort of comes into that boundary fence where there's a gully. Looking at the plans and speaking to your engineer, Mr. Dednam, it would appear that the rear car park and the turning circle is going to be around about 4 metres from the common boundary fence. It's going to be at around about a height of 1.65 metres above the ground level on an elevated slope. So looking at this, it would appear that the car park with a crash barrier is going to be greater than 2 metres above the rear boundary fence. And as I say, and 4 metres from the boundary. That's a major concern to Carol and Charles. There's also the gradient of the driveway, which will run from Lower Jordan Hill Road, being quite steep to run down to that rear driveway. If a car is leaving the site to go up to Lower Jordan Hill Road and it's under load, and if it's a for an example, a WRX Subaru, the noise underload would have an impact on the neighbours, particularly Carol and Charles. So it's the movement of traffic on the driveway, given the gradient that they have. It's the proximity of that car park, even though there's going to be bushes, shrubbery, there's going to be plants put in place. And the other thing that sort of with Carol and Charles is the fact of their age. It's been put to them by a real estate professional that if they were to sell their house with all this in place, their house might sell, but it could be detrimental to them. It's hard to say, or they said it's hard to say if there would be any loss of value, but it might be harder to sell given that the proposed development went ahead. Does that sound okay?
Yeah, I think
so. They had a report. They had a report done. They were given a valuation on the house. When they sat down to discuss that, the real estate, and then they put it to the real estate agent. They said, "Well, look, there's going to be a development go on," and then there was the well, that could have an impact.
Were there other points that you wanted to make, Mr. Donovan?
Oh, look, I think that if you guys have got the copy of the report, it's just that, Carol and Charles, particularly Carol, is just suffering. She's got an anxiety issue just over the fact of what they've got now. They're not anti the development. It's just the fact there's going to be something like an Argyle Street car park at their rear boundary fence, given them what they've had over these last years. Now, they're not against the development as such. It's just that, I think any fair-minded person wouldn't wish to have something as gaudy as that on their rear boundary fence.
Thank you. Carol, did you want to add anything, or are you happy with what Steve said? And you just have to take yourself off mute.
Are you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I just want to ask the committee, if they were in living in this house and they were having that placed in their backyard, how they would feel about having this kind of development in there. And I want them to think about it when they're making their decision, of course. And I also want to say that these developers are from Melbourne and they'll develop it and they don't care about the houses around or the environment. All they want to do is develop it, sell it, and take the money back to Melbourne. I thought we were supposed to be all about Tassie, not developers coming from the mainland, taking their money back there. That's all I want to say.
Okay, I don't know how much control we actually have over that, but you've made your point. I'll open it now to the committee to ask questions. So if you could raise your hand, and we'll start with Alderman Briscoe, please.
Thank you, Deputy. I wonder if I could ask a question to Steve. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Right. Can you see a solution? I'm looking at the plans on page 39, and can you see the car park situation? To me, is quite some distance from the boundary. Can you see a solution that would keep your Miss Lynch and husband happy, or?
Well, I certainly don't think that I don't have a copy of those plans. But however, if the car park were to be at the top end of the property, as opposed to being at the rear boundary, I don't know if that's ever come up for consideration, but it might be beneficial in terms of costs for the developer. Certainly, as opposed to having the car park the volumes of cars, which is unknown, and if it was up to the top of the subdivision as opposed to down the bottom, that perhaps would please Carol. But I think Carol would need to make some comment about that.
Perhaps we could hear from Carol then. You need to turn on your mic, off your.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep. Okay. Possibly it would be a lot more, but I'm just against the whole thing. I think they're crowding into our backyard, and they're taking away all the beautiful trees, and we used to have lots of wildlife come in there. It was such a peaceful place, and now they're cramming 5 units into it. Plus, when I look out my backyard, the actual driveway is going to be way above my back fence. I mean, you think about it. How would that be for you if somebody did that to you?
Thank you.
Anything further, Alderman Briscoe?
No, that's fine for the moment. Thank you.
Okay. I wonder, Carol, obviously that's the cars are facing, the visitor parking is facing directly to your boundary, albeit set back 4 to 5 metres.
Yeah.
And there will be vehicle stoppers. Would it be a solution to you to have something more of a barrier, such as a small fence at that point?
Well, my fence already is a pretty high fence. That was one we put in ourselves after we had all that flooding, and it'd have to be way above so that we don't see it. Charles.
Thank you. Alderman Briscoe, did you have something else you wanted to add?
No, sorry. I'll turn off my.
Okay. Any further questions? Okay.
Can I just ask one more question?
What's your question?
Question is, when will I know whether this or if this is going to go ahead?
So we make a recommendation to full council and it will so at this meeting, and then it will go to full council I think it's next week, so next Monday.
So do we do the same thing over again?
No, this is when you give your deputation.
Okay,
so I'll now call on the representatives of the applicant. So Mr. Luke Chamberlain, Carolyn Graham from Track Consultants, and Keith Westbrook. Could you answer some of the questions that have already been raised, and also just provide some solutions to those? Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Luke Chamberlain from Tract Consultants. My colleague Caroline is with us, and also the architect, as you mentioned, Keith Westbrook, both on hand to answer questions should the need arise at the end of my deputation. I'm happy, Deputy Mayor, to answer some of those questions from Ms Lynch and Mr Donovan, and look, do understand, must be said, that change is going to be recognisable and noticeable for Ms Lynch, and we certainly do sympathise with her views. We have been very cognisant of the fact that there are interfaces on this property that we need to be mindful of, and we've taken that approach right from the outset. This application may have gone before you a lot earlier if we weren't in a position to interrogate those interfaces more carefully, take note of the submissions made by the neighbours, and indeed talk to many of them to try and understand where improvements could be made. And that's why the application was amended and then put on notice a second time. And we're certainly of the view that we've made a number of very significant changes that improve the condition to those interfaces. But turning to Ms. Lynch's concerns, certainly we're very focused on a landscape solution here that is suitably dense and fit for purpose. She clearly has concerns about screening, how this will change her outlook. I have seen her outlook from within the property, understand that she's got a nice view. We are intent on limiting the change that will be presented by this, and there is more than enough room within that 4 metres to plant a range of different species to help to screen that out. The earlier application proposed removal of all of the trees on the property, mainly because most of them have reached the end of their useful life expectancy or soon will. But in the application, we've committed to retaining, there's an alder tree in the southeast corner and a large eucalypt. They're now being retained, and also an old pear tree up at the front of the driveway up at Lower Jordan Hill Road. In terms of the structure at the rear, it has been lowered and it has been offset further from her boundary, and we understood that there was a need for us to do that. It took a bit of engineering work to figure it out, but we've managed to get there. That structure at the rear is only really there because there's a requirement for 2 visitor car spaces associated with the development of this nature. Now, each townhouse has 2 car parks allocated to it, plus the 2 visitor spaces. Now, the extent to which they're used ultimately might be, up to the choices that people make, but I wouldn't suggest it's going to be heavily used to the same extent that the car parks will be for each dwelling. It'll be more incidental use rather than the daily use that other townhouses might use. If there's other aspects that Ms. Lynch would like answers to, I'm happy to expand further.
Did you want to raise anything more? I'm not going back to Ms. Lynch right at the moment. This is not a discussion between the parties. It's to answer some of those questions. Keith or Caroline, do you have anything to add in a couple of minutes that you might have left before we go to questions?
Sorry, Deputy Mayor, I might just say we do have a presentation that was forwarded through to your governance department, which we were going to just quickly step through to outline the application. Would that be of assistance?
Yes, do we have that as a shared screen, Craig? Okay, all right, thank you. And if you can keep it fairly short, because we do have quite a long agenda. Yeah,
well understood. I'll be very quick. First of all, we thank you for the opportunity again. Our client is a partnership. One of the parties from our client group is from Melbourne. The other is born and bred in Hobart. This is the largest site within a very large radius. It's also a very, very wide site, width of approximately 34 metres. Properties either side on Lower Jordan Hill Road, by comparison, are around 15 metres. So it's much wider than anything around it. The next image I can talk to, if you like, shows how the current lot pattern is made up. You can see quite clearly that there has been development in this sort of mid-block setting between Newdigate Street and Lower Jordan Hill Road.
30 seconds, Chair.
This block is quite obviously one that can be developed. It's not a park, it's a private development, it's a private lot. So, we are entitled to have a look at what might be appropriate for it. Next slide. We say that they're architecturally designed. The brief from our client was very, very good. I'm very pleased that they appointed the architect that they have, Cumulus Studio, highly renowned, very successful, good design architect. Next slide. We've considered all of the matters that I've provided a summary of. Next slide. This outlines the changes. The dotted line is the previous application. and then we'll get to the landscape plan finally. Which indicates that there is a real focus on greening the site, giving it its new phase of life with new landscaping, screening, and really a wonderful place, not only for people to live in, but also have the walkability of such a good, well-located area. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, and I think that's the perhaps if we go back to that last slide, Craig. I think that's more of the landscaping. Okay, now I'll open it to questions of the applicants. Councillor Harvey.
Yes, could you talk about the driveway? When I went past and checked the property the other day, I thought it was quite a challenge to be able to turn in and turn out of the property with cars parked either side of the top of the driveway. And also, the neighbour talked about the height of the driveway with regard to their property. So how much of infill or landfill will be required to adjust the heights of the driveway and also getting in and out of the property? Could you just explain that to us, please?
That might be one for Keith.
Hi. Yeah, certainly. Look, the driveway has been designed by Aldermark engineers in conjunction with Milan Predanovic, traffic engineer. They've analysed the 3D swept paths of access for vehicles in and out of the driveway, part of the application. In terms of the driveway levels and design, the initial scheme was designed to the Australian standards, which essentially resulted in a driveway which closely followed the natural or the existing gradients of the hill, but as a result, by the time it got to the bottom of the site, it was significantly elevated. So through the process of designing with the traffic engineer, we've now got a solution which, for the majority of the site, basically sits on the natural or existing topography, and then it's really just where it then meets those visitor car parks at the bottom of the site, as previously noted, where it becomes a elevated structure. But the gradients, essentially designed through consultation with the traffic engineer.
Well, yeah, I know anything can be achieved with the traffic engineers, but the steepness of the site and that pinch point behind the house, I saw issues with the driveway, and I know it can meet Australian standards and all that stuff, but coming back to the top of the driveway, how much wider will that be on the road? Because it didn't seem to be a very wide crossover and cars parked either side of it. How much extra space will be created at the top there to make turning in and out of the driveway safe?
Sorry, Luke, you go.
I was just going to make the comment that the sightline splays are very important in those scenarios. And that's been modified and worked through in more detail post-lodgement. We've got the comfort from the experts that the sight lines are appropriate both for pedestrians and other vehicles using the street, and that the turning in and out is adequate to perform those manoeuvres. It's also on the basis that there isn't a very high density of dwellings proposed on the site, such that those volumes aren't as high as they might be in other scenarios.
So talking about how many, 5 units. So how many people are you anticipating living in the 5 units? Can you just remind me how many bedrooms each unit is?
Each is 3 bedrooms. They're, in terms of the market, we know supply's pretty tight, has been the last few years. Might be young families, might be young professionals, might be downsizers. It's a pretty good model with varying open space sizes. So look, it could be a mix. You could expect up to 5 in a house if there's a young family with 3 kids, but on the other end of the scale, it could be a retired couple. We just don't know exactly.
Mm-hmm. And what about the house at the top of the hill? What's that? Is that currently occupied?
Yes, it is occupied. We thought from the outset that it was really important to retain that house because it makes a good contribution to the street. And we really didn't want to go and make a large change to a street that is already functioning very nicely with a lot of its character. So we provided a lot of emphasis on that, and that was part of the brief. It's been occupied for several months.
So that's a rental property then? Yep.
Well, no, it's as I understand it, it's transacted. There was an application, you might recall I was before you in the chamber last year when the subdivision of that house was approved by council. And I understand there's a family with school-aged children that have that have purchased that property and are now occupying it.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions from committee? If not, I have a number of questions. Just in relation to Mrs. Lynch's place and her neighbour on Newdigate Street, the overshadowing has obviously reduced with the new plans and setback and being pretty much within the building envelope. Is there anything more that can be done in relation to that? I know that was brought up in representations.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. The shadowing requirements, as you'll know, are measured at the winter solstice. So it's a worst case scenario. It's in fact, a lot of the shadow cause that time of the year in the afternoon is from Mount Wellington. So the window of opportunity for direct sunlight is quite limited by nature of the geographic features and the fall of the land. There has been a lowering and a lot of massaging to the design to ensure that there is a reasonable outcome in terms of shadows, and I wouldn't suggest that there's any further requirements or measures to be made. Indeed, before and after the solstice, it doesn't take too long for there to be a much fuller allocation of sunlight. And we're very comfortable with what we've put to you.
In relation to the driveway, the directly opposite neighbours were concerned about the sweep of the car. Again, could you just describe how those changes allow that turning left into Lower Jordan Hill Road?
It's bearing in mind that none of us before you are traffic engineers, but really these things are about safety and manoeuvrability. And the advice we have is that it will work to a standard that is safe and acceptable. The changes to the driveway and indeed near the top of the site, we're also informed in consultation with one of the neighbours on Lower Jordan Hill Road. There's also been some changes along there in terms of landscaping, again in consultation to ensure certain species and certain heights are allocated there to offer some screening. But there's probably not much I can say about swept path diagrams and so forth because it's not my area of expertise.
Yep, and I mean I've got quite a number of questions, but and obviously Councillor Harvey's already raised the issue of the gradient and you know what has been achieved in trying to get a safe passage down the side of the house. Just in relation to bins, both on bin night and where the bins might end up going, because that's potentially 10 bins going onto the footpath, and also the placement of the bin enclosure. Has there been any thought that might have an impact on the direct neighbours at 28?
Thanks, that's a good question. The bin enclosure we consider is most appropriate up the top of the driveway so that people can carry their waste at their whatever time they need to without having to wheel the bin a terribly long distance. In terms of placement on the street, I know Mr. Westbrook was out on site reviewing this recently, so he might like to add to that, but we're confident there's enough room to accommodate all of the bins.
Yeah, so I had a look on a Wednesday, early morning to have a look and see what the current situation is. It was a rubbish only, so no recycling bins, but there were no bins at the time immediately in front of 26 Lower Jordan Hill Road, which has a grass nature strip. So we would think there's ample room for the bins to be located there, which is close proximity to the bin storage.
Okay, yeah, usually 2 bins go out each time, but just a final question. What's it? Oh, just the number of, Mr. Chamberlain, the number of units obviously would have less of an impact on neighbours. And obviously we have an application for 5 in front of us, but can you just go through the applicant's thinking there?
Yeah, thanks for the question. Look, the development footprint is actually quite compact, and these dwellings are attached to each other, meaning that there's one consolidated footprint with ample room around the edges to provide the landscape that you really should be expecting in a location like this. Now, and of course we look at all scenarios, had four dwellings been on the table, maybe we would have taken up some of that by widening each of them a little bit. Maybe the standard of architecture and the investment that our client's making in really what it wants to be exemplary design. I've been in these scenarios before where these things get watered down a bit. Clients then maybe take some money out of the landscape budget and you end up getting maybe an okay response, but there's a real intent here for an outstanding and lasting development that stands a test of time. And the project economics are such that they can invest in that at the density that they've proposed. And we'd say that 5 is certainly not unreasonable and it's within the capabilities of the site.
Okay, thank you. If there are no further questions, what we'll do is now open the item for discussion. So councillors and aldermen, Alderman Barakis.
Thank you, Chair. I'm reasonably comfortable with what I've heard to move the recommendation, but just before I do, I suppose I've got a question for the director. In regards to the concerns from the representative about privacy from the car park, can I get a response from you from that as far as what the officers think about that from the aspect?
Yeah, look, thank you. Thank you, Chair. Look, we don't believe that based on the provisions of the scheme, there are issues of discretion around those privacy matters. We think that there's ample room to accommodate a fairly dense landscaping solution on that rear boundary. Yeah, look, I appreciate the concerns of the representative. It will be a change outlook, but over time with landscaping, that visual impact will be significantly diminished. And
is landscaping part of the, I suppose, is that do you know if that's planned there as far as covering landscape, or is that conditioned, or?
Yeah, it is conditioned.
Okay. Oh, that was going to be my second. So look, in that case, I'm comfortable to move the recommendations, Chair, and leave it at that. I think it more or less speaks for itself.
Alderman Barakis, there was a memo sent through by Ms. Abbey in relation to this. There was just a mistake with the number of car parking spaces.
Right.
So are you happy to move it with
I'll move the amended one, yeah.
Yep, thank you. Thank you. Further discussion? Councillor Dutta.
I just have a question through you to the director, and I'm using my memory here, and I hope my memory serves me right. I understand that in attachment A of may have been page 66, there was a mention that the submitted documents appears to satisfy. I think it was clause E675P1. Now, I'm just wondering if the director could make a comment on that, please, if I'm referring to the right one.
Yes, so that's section 6.12 on page 66. Yeah, look, well, with any planning proposal, those plans are an indicative proposal, and we will need to confirm those measurements and the like with any detailed building application. So we check those detailed building proposal against the approved planning. So I think that that was the language that was being used in relation to it. It appears to comply. We will confirm that, and there's a condition on the recommended condition requiring compliance.
Thank you.
Further discussion? Okay, I'll just might make a couple of points. I know that there has been quite a lot of concern from neighbours, and obviously there will be some impact on particularly the internal block, which comes off Newdigate Street, and the representation was quite expressed quite clearly the concerns of loss of sunlight and so forth. Now, some of those things have been addressed, and I think there has been quite a lot of sensitive design and discussion with many of the neighbours. It is a large block. There have been other quite high density or medium density developments in this area off Lower Jordan Hill Road or from Newdigate Street, so in the Providence Valley, and it will be a significant change. I think there are some quite sensitive designs around landscaping, and whilst there are some issues about getting onto Lower Jordan Hill Road, I think the engineering approach has been quite sensitive. So on balance, even though it's 5 and possibly 4 could be better, I think that I'll support this application. Councillor Harvey, did you have something else you wanted to say?
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. I think for me, there's the shock factor with a development application like this as well. You go from having a substantial block of land to suddenly you've got a development, and I think it's probably too big a development. I would have preferred to be sitting here tonight, you know, supporting a development that was somewhat smaller. It's a really tough decision to vote on this tonight, and I am erring on supporting the development, but I still have another week to reconsider. But I guess for me, it's the steepness of the block coming down the driveway that I have issues with, and cars coming up to to the road there and safely exiting and entering the block. A smaller development I would have supported enthusiastically. A big a sizable development like this is more of a challenge for me. But on balance, I'll support it tonight, but I still have another week to reconsider. So I guess that's all I've got to say really, but I'm challenged by the number of units in the backyard I would have loved to have seen a smaller development that I could wholeheartedly support rather than a larger development that I'm not 100% supportive of.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Harvey. I will now put it to the vote with the amendment as described on the memo. Is there any dissent from the vote? Councillor Harvey, can you put your hand down? Raise your hand if there's any consent. Okay, so that's passed unanimously, and we'll go to full council next Monday. Thank you. We now move to 7.1.2, which is 851B, 873, 873A, 875 Sandy Bay Road, Sandy Bay. We do have a number of representatives, and I've asked them to speak for 3 minutes. So, Craig, can you let the representatives in, please? Is that everybody, Craig? Hello. I think we have everybody who is going to speak to 7.1.2 851B Sandy Bay Road. Now, I've invited you to speak, and we'll be pleased if you can speak for 3 minutes. We'll start with Ms. Victoria McDonald. So, Victoria, would you like, Vicky, if you'd like to take yourself off mute, and you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
If something is illogical, if it doesn't make sense, then it's wrong. When this first change to our private laneway was first mooted to us in the middle of last year, it came under the guise of for garbage trucks and Australia Post. When the plans were emailed to my sister, the phrase improved traffic flow had been added. After we, the owners of the land, let the applicants know that we would not give our assent to them changing our laneway, we had a further visit from Mr. Greg Sr., who came to see if the girls really meant this, and reiterating that they would be responsible for the costs. Now, why would a developer want to spend many, many thousands of dollars improving or changing a laneway that doesn't legally lead to his land, and which, according to council approvals, can't? It didn't make sense, especially as they already have a half-finished road. When the application finally came to council, it had changed direction and was about sightlines on Sandy Bay Road and fire truck turning circles. It didn't make sense. However, trawling through the many pages of misdirection that this application is, I began to get an inkling of the purpose behind it. The only logical explanation I could find was the little phrase, right of way. If this application gets passed, it gives right of way. Now I understood it. It's logical, but wrong. Further reading of Millen Providotic's traffic impact statement, the brief of which wasn't included and which we haven't seen, produced a fish and a fear down my spine as I read on page 2, it would help with traffic movements for a few extra houses. So, not just the current house at 851B and the as yet unconstructed house, it's a few extra houses. Even worse when you read the letter from the fire services, where again we don't have the applicant's letter, they refer to a multi-unit development. So it's not just the house at 851 and the one with planning permission. The report before you stresses that the right-of-way would only be for the 2 houses mentioned. But what guarantees do we have that the applicants will comply? Their current permit says they shouldn't be using our laneway to access a house, but they are and have been continuously, as has Mr. Adam Griggs to access his own land. Compliance has been a serious issue, to the point that a compliance order has been issued to them. That's currently held up due to this application. Interesting timing. This issue concerns me deeply. Are we to have yet another half-finished project like the long road across 851A and B? Thank you, councillors, for listening to my concerns. Please do not grant this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions of Vicky? Or are you happy to keep going with the next representative committee? Yep. Okay. So I'll hand it over to you now, Penny. So if you can just take yourself off mute. And Mr. Hendry, would you mind putting yourself on mute, please? Mr. Hendry? Okay. Oh, I don't think you can hear me. Okay. Ms. McDonald, if you'd like to start.
Thank you, and thank you for your time. I am asking you to reject this application. The application is for alterations and change of access, and I want to start by pointing out three of the logistical issues with the change of access. Firstly, giving permission for a house numbered 851B Sandy Bay Road to access their property via a laneway between 873 and 875 has many problems. We know from experience that houses will then display a false number on their house, which means service maps do not match the numbers on houses, and this is a major issue for TasWater and emergency services. Secondly, when all the houses currently with permission to use this private laneway are constructed, there won't be any more room at the bottom of the hill for our wheelie bins. So the area for wheelie bins will be full. And thirdly, apart from one house, we all back out of our driveways onto our private laneway. So having extra traffic and potentially bigger trucks using this laneway is an issue for me. I now want to talk about the risk and maintenance. The applicant is not the owner of this land. When we purchased our house at 873 Sandy Bay Road, it was made very clear to us that this is a private laneway from Sandy Bay Road that we use to access our house. It's on our title, and therefore the maintenance of it is shared by the owners of the road. If more houses are given access, how do we hold them accountable for damage and maintenance? And the applicant and the owners of 851B have access to their property via another way. Their access is in place. It's not yet sealed. Now, regarding the alterations to our private laneway, the applicant has said he will cover the cost of these alterations, but has offered no solution into the future. These alterations will allow for bigger trucks and more traffic, and this will result in deterioration, which can lead to unexpected and ongoing maintenance. I'm also worried about our water supply, internet and power supply by the proposed alterations to our driveway. And finally, there is the issue of responsibility. Are those of us who are the owners of the land now to be held responsible for these works? There have been no reported accidents at this entry to Sandy Bay Road. However, the proposed alterations could allow for bigger trucks to drive to and from Sandy Bay Road and extra traffic, and this worries me. I don't want the risk of this being my responsibility. And the final issue of responsibility comes up in the report that was prepared for this meeting by Helen Ayres. On page 31, she makes mention that it is the owner that has to pay for any damage to council infrastructure resulting from the implementation of this permit. I'm one of the owners of the land, but I'm not the applicant. Helen Ayres has emailed me today to say that the report can't be changed, but that this meeting can deal with this issue. I thank you for your time, and I do ask you to reject this application.
Thank you. And as part of that memo committee, we do have an amendment which Ms. McDonald had just referred to. So are there any questions, or do you want to keep going, committee? Any specific questions? Alderman Briscoe?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, just clarify, the land of this application is a right-of-way for the applicant? I'm just not clear.
Mr. McDonald?
I'm not completely clear on the right-of-way issue either. I'm hoping when James Morrison speaks, he can be.
It might be sensible to have that clarified by the director right at this point, because it is quite a confusing application. So, Director?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Chair. Yes, it is. There is a right of way to Sandy Bay over a number of parcels of land that provides access, legal access to 851B, and it to facilitate this access, it is proposed to upgrade that right of way to facilitate the additional traffic that would be accessing over that right of way. That's the basic premise of the application.
Further questions? Councillor Dutta.
Just to clarify that further, please. So am I to understand that the applicant is also the owner of the right of way, and he is going to, or he is willing to pay money to extend this laneway?
Director?
The applicant and the owner, 851B, is seeking to upgrade the right of way that is in favour of 851B to accommodate an expanded rights of access to that property. At this point in time, there is approval to access one of the dwellings via this right of way. Another dwelling and a yet unconstructed dwelling, previous approval to access off another right of way over a land to the north. It is proposed to now allow both that additional dwelling and the yet unconstructed dwelling to now access over this right of way to the south.
Okay, look, I think we'll continue on. There's probably more clarification to come from the next representor. I think, Ms. Payne, you were shaking your head. So if you'd like to unmute yourself, and your time starts when you've done that.
Good evening, committee, and I thank you for allowing me to speak. The World Health Organization states noise health effects are the physical and psychological health consequences of regular exposure to consistent elevated sound levels. Noise from traffic in particular is considered by the WHO to be one of the worst environmental stresses for humans, second only to air pollution. Noise from traffic can cause health problems for people and wildlife. The personal areas that would affect me are lack of concentration, cognitive performance, mood swings, sleep issues, cardiovascular disease, high blood pressure, mental health, stress, anxiety, depression. If this planning permit is granted, the potential of vehicle pollution on our private laneway would increase by 971%. With the works proposed, there is also likely to be interference with the tree root system located on the property of 873 Sandy Bay Road. This may mean that the root system of our beautiful eucalyptus tree will be compromised by the requested works, thus causing irrefutable damage to the tree. This tree is home to many birds in the area, in particular the swift parrot. I've sighted the swift parrot in and around our beautiful eucalyptus tree. The current verge or vegetation strip at the end of our private laneway is owned by 873 northern side and 873A southern side. It's my understanding not owned by the applicant or owners of 851B. The verge provides our private laneway safety when travelling, as it can be seen all the way down our private laneway and tells all driving that there is a curve in the road before currently accessing Sandy Bay Road. This causes drivers to automatically slow down to a gradual stop prior to exiting the private laneway. The verge or vegetation strip is also a reinstatement for those driving along Sandy Bay Road that this is a private laneway. The verge and the curve are inbuilt safety features. I'm a disabled person with limited mobility. I use a motorised wheelchair to travel when out of the house. I do not own a car. The usage of our private laneway increased to above the current 7 properties and emergency services vehicles, combined with noise increase of vehicle travel and the added noise increase of trucks travelling up and down our private laneway to build the new houses, would put me in an untenable position. I'd not be able to travel down our private laneway in safety. I would lose my independence. It would stop my ability to go out when and where I wanted. I would lose my freedom. And as one of those currently stuck in Melbourne at the moment, I well and truly know what that really means. This would also mean I would be unable to walk my support dog. The dog walks on a lead. I travel in my motorised wheelchair. We have done it for years. One of the main reasons I bought the property was due to the quietness of the area and the low amount of vehicle traffic on our private laneway. I'd just like to refer back to the question asked about right of way. I believe the comment was made. The current person that is put in the application does not have right of way. That's the current person that's actually submitted the application, does not have right of way. I thank you for listening. And I am so jealous of Tasmania at the moment, you would not believe. However, I do ask you, do not pass this application. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Payne. Any questions, Alderman Briscoe?
Yes, so the assertion there from Ms. Payne is that the applicant doesn't own the right of way. Who owns the right of way apart from yourself and your neighbour?
Jackie Smith, James Morrison, Penny, Vicky, and I believe Mr. Hendry has also a right of way, but it's not the applicant. The applicant is not Mr. Hendry. Okay,
there's obviously a legal issue here, which we'll have to sort out with the director in a moment after we've heard the representations. Thank you.
Okay, no worries. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dutta.
Yeah,
Any questions?
yeah, no, I was going to follow up, and Jeff has made that point. Thank you. I'm sorry, Alderman Briscoe has made the point.
Okay, all right. Any further questions? If not, thanks, Ms. Payne. We'll go now to Mr. James Morrison, owner of 873A. Mr. Morrison.
Thanks very much for allowing me to talk at the meeting. What I'd like to say is that 851B already has an approved access partially constructed. The partial construction of this accessway inflicted considerable damage to the sensitive and protective native vegetation in the area. This application seeks to overturn a previous planning approval that prevented 851B Sandy Bay Road from using the shared laneway from Sandy Bay Road over 873's access. This approval restricted 851B from using this access for safety reasons, created by, amongst other concerns, the unsafe junction of the laneway with Sandy Bay Road. Limited sight lines from the junction to oncoming cars approaching from the south and the steepness of the road at the junction are critical safety concerns. The submission claims the intended change to the laneway make it less dangerous and therefore should permit the 2 additional houses on 851B to use the laneway for access. My representation argues that the proposed changes will not improve the most significant safety concerns, the sight lines mentioned before and the steepness of the drive at the junction. We note that the sightlines are misrepresented in the submitted documentation. The documentation claims that the sightlines, as defined by AS 2890.1, are 65 meters. An on-site investigation reveals that unobstructed sightlines are actually about 50 meters, and obstructed sightlines are about 50 meters, and unobstructed sightlines are approximately 25 meters. And you can check it on the content of my representation. I've got photographs demonstrating this. I suppose what's critical is where you take the setback from the road. It appears that the applicant has taken the edge of the carriageway, but I've taken from the edge of the cycleway. So you can't discount the cycleway because you can't extend your car out into the cycleway when you're leaving the property. We note that the council traffic officers have based their assessment of the performance solution proposed by the application on the 65-meter sightline. The information on which the performance solution has been based and the basis on which the council officers have supported the application is therefore incorrect. And that's a simple thing to check. This is a significant concern for us who take responsibility for the risk and liabilities of an accident were there to occur. I mean, for instance, us as owners of the laneway, do we take responsibility? Does the council or does the applicant? We question why the council would allow these safety concerns regarding the laneway to be exacerbated when 851B already has an approved safe access. If the council were to approve the application, we request that the following conditions be imposed on the permit that requires the applicant to first, A, not use the laneway until the upgrade works have been completed. And this is because of the applicant's past record of sticking to planning requirements. And B, that the partially completed existing accessway, which has significantly disturbed sensitive native vegetation, be removed. And the native vegetation be reinstated timelines. Thank you.
Keep going, you've got 30 seconds.
Maybe for questions.
All right, well, I'll open it to questions. Alderman Briscoe, you have your hand up. Just unmute yourself first.
Sorry about that, Chair. I didn't drive past this right away today, but from just Google Earthing it a moment ago, there seems to be a number of properties using this right away. There seems to be five letterboxes on the driveway. Is that correct?
That's correct. So 873 and 873A have got a right of way over that, and they share the ownership of that laneway.
851B Southern House.
851B Southern House has right of way over that land, as does 875.
3 houses.
And there's another few houses that have right of way. 875-1B has
851
shares a right of way and an ownership of a right of way opposite 873A, but that's above 873. That's all very complicated, but that's the gist of it.
That's above.
Yes, it seems like a question that so many share this right away. It should be a road, but anyway, I'll ask the director about that. Thanks.
Councillor Harvey.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Morrison. Could you tell me whether or not the laneway, the right-of-way, is on your title, and is it on everyone's title?
It's on our title, on 873A's title, on 873 and 873A's title, yes.
So is it on Mr. Hendry's title?
Only above 873. So if you look at the
beyond,
it's beyond 873. It's on his title, but not below. In other words, and the most of, and sort of, I suppose 90% of the road that he's going to be wanting to provide is not on his title.
And explain how maintenance of this road occurs at the moment.
At the moment, it is shared by those who have rights of way over it. So we have done some repairs to it, and we've amicably shared the costs of that.
So what would be the situation if others were using the road, but it wasn't on their title?
Well, they wouldn't be. Well, they certainly they don't have rights to use it, and they haven't been asked to pay for it. 875-1B has paid a portion of it because one of their houses they do own does have rights of way over it.
851B.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Data.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question of clarification here. It was mentioned that there are two driveway. There's one already started, and now there is another one. Could you clarify this, please?
So 851B built a driveway and he has rights of way over 851A, which goes in the other direction, that goes towards Hobart. That's for the two houses, at the bottom of 851B. So that road was constructed probably about 8 to 10 years ago. It was never completed, created lots of destruction, but it was a requirement of a previous planning approval for the houses. and it was planning approval number. Have you got that?
Yeah.
Oh, anyway, it was,
Yeah, I don't think it probably matters, but it was approved. And Councillor Dutta, page 254 of our report has, you can blow that diagram up to see where the road is coming from, the northern aspect, I suppose that would be.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
but the reason for that, and in that planning application, there was a requirement for bollards to be put up so that A51B could not cross over to 873A. And the reason for that was the safety concerns because of the junction with Sandy Bay Road. And I've spoken to that in my representation, and I speak to the fact that the basic safety concerns haven't been addressed. But widening the road, you cannot address the most fundamental safety concern, which is the sight lines to the south along Sandy Bay Road.
Further questions? So we have the next representative. Thanks, Mr. Morrison. Mrs. Jackie, is it Salatay? Yeah. Okay, Jackie, you have your 3 minutes. So if you've got new information rather than the same information, that would be grand. Thank you.
So hello everyone. Thank you for this opportunity. I'm the owner of Unit 1875 Sandy Bay Road, which is the front property onto Sandy Bay Road. And this property, this application will affect it. And I just wanted to say I've lived here for 10 years since July 2010. I'm most concerned that this application may be granted without all the owners of the land having been provided with full knowledge of the intention of the application. I'm questioning the transparency of the process. As an owner of the land in question, I have never seen the brief that preceded the plans, PLN 20-132, and am therefore unable to understand what the applicant, on behalf of 851B, holds to gain from this proposal. The applicant has a history of commencing work and then not completing it, and has also devastated the bushland in our surroundings. The aggravation, angst and stress that this process instigated by the applicant have caused to myself and my recently deceased husband is beyond description. My husband and I purchased the plans of this application, which were delivered on June the 3rd. And within a very short period of time of my husband receiving them, he suffered a fatal heart attack on that day, June the 3rd. Okay, so great has the stress been around this application, even though we cannot prove a causal link. Not only did I lose my husband suddenly, but these proposed changes to our private laneway will impact immeasurably on the amenity and the quiet enjoyment of my property. My home and living room windows directly abut onto the private laneway. I have prior experience of the impact of many heavy vehicles coming up the private laneway and of them idling right outside my windows. The impact of this was fumes and noise entering my house. In the 10 years I've lived here, I've experienced heavy trucks, long delivery trucks and trailers, ambulances and hearses, which were all able to gain access and travel along our private laneway. Why is it now necessary for this to be changed? No explanation has been forthcoming. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Councillor Harvey.
How often do you experience large trucks coming up the laneway? And I guess it's a question for the director. Is it legal that trucks traverse a private laneway?
May I answer? Trucks have come up this laneway when has been building in progress. So there have been houses built, amenities built, things like that, and that is why trucks have come up the laneway. They can't go up for no reason because there's nowhere to go.
Okay, and I guess it's to the director. Is that is that allowed? Are trucks allowed to use private laneways? Is there a right of access?
Director?
If they have a reason to access a property off the right of way, yes, they do. Clearly, there's a capacity issue as to the nature of the vehicle that's traversing over the laneway, but in a general sense, if they're accessing a property that has legal rights over that right of way, then they're entitled to use the right of way.
Any further questions? If not, I'll now ask Mr. Quentin Hendry if you're there. Mr. Hendry, I can't see you, but you've heard some of the concerns already raised, and you have 3 minutes, but we will obviously ask more questions of you. So if you can answer some of those concerns. Thank you.
Yeah, good evening, Planning Committee. Yeah, well, just to start in response, ultimately this planning application has been submitted to improve the amenity under the Planning Directive 1.5 Development in Bushfire-Prone Areas of 2017 from the Council, noting that the roadway, the carriageway or Sandy Bay Road form has changed in recent years, speed reduction from 60 kilometres an hour to 50 kilometres an hour. And what my belief is what Mr. Morrison was alluding to was a previous planning appeals determination based on the previous speed limit of 60 kilometres an hour and the line of sight distance that speed limit imposed. In relation to heavy vehicle movement at this moment in time, there is no ability to pass if there is a heavy vehicle. So as an example, where the current fire provisions are, if TFS were to come on site to fight a fire, they would deny suitable egress from the site. In relation to all the references to legal right, I'd refer the committee to pages 313 and 314 of the agenda, which is the title and the narrative, which clearly indicates a private right of way carriageway A over the relevant subpoints A, B, C, D, E, D, I, etc. With respect to maintenance, that was raised. I do note that we have contributed, and I do note that the proponents or the representatives have approached us on numerous occasions to facilitate sharing of costs. And on the last subsequent sharing of costs, we paid 2 units based on our usage of the roadway. So, yes, just like to highlight that point. Is there any questions?
Does the committee have questions? Alderman Barakis and then Councillor Harvey.
Thank you. I suppose the core question, I think, is almost more of a one of consent rather than a planning. But whose consent do you need for this to go ahead, and do you have that consent? I suppose is a core issue here.
Yeah, correct. The only consent required was from the General Manager for landowner consent to cross the Hobart City Council land prior to entry onto Sandy Bay Road.
So you don't need consent from the other people who have the right of way on their title?
No, my belief, the advice provided by the planners was they were all just to be notified of the intent to use the right of way.
Right. Okay. All right. Right.
And that was undertaken.
We'll get clarification
Yep.
from the director or Ms. Abbey. Thank you.
Thank you. In a planning sense, there was no requirement to obtain the consent of the other landowners to make the application, and it's a separate issue. It's a private law issue as to whether or not the developer would need the consent of the landowners to actually do the works. It's my understanding that their consent is not needed, but that's something that the parties should obtain their own legal advice.
All right. Any further questions, Alderman Barakis, or can we move on to Councillor Harvey?
No, I'm good for the moment. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Harvey.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Mr. Mr. Hendry, there were some issues raised around the transparency of this project, this area, and about what the future intent is for accessing other properties via this private right-of-way. So could you clarify what the intent is down the track? Is it just to access the one property, or is it to access multiple properties at a future point in time? So I think, you know, the question of transparency, I think, is an important one, so that everyone's clear what the intent of this application is.
Mr. Hendry.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Councillor. Yeah, it's so, as you are aware, there is an additional, well, there's one dwelling that already has access to the laneway. There's an additional 2 dwellings, so the intent would be for those 2 dwellings to access the laneway and not create a loop road at all.
Just to follow up with the loop road, or the other road that's heads north, what's the purpose of that road, and is that part of the plans here?
In short, no. The purpose of that road is for future assessment by the council for development potential.
So if I could just clarify, that road's off the table then because of this project, but that other road was the subject of a compliance issue, as I understand?
Yes, correct. Yes.
We might get some clarification from the director or Ms. Abbey, because my understanding was that road was pretty important in access to the other 2 buildings at 851B.
Thank you, Chair. The earlier permit which was granted has a condition that the right-of-way is provided onto the adjacent land, which is onto 851A. Without a variation to that permit condition, that is still applicable, and it's my understanding that that is the subject of current compliance action.
Thanks for that explanation. So in effect, it still needs to be a road that is usable and cannot be and is meant to be used for the as yet built building on 851B. I'm getting a nod. Yes.
Sorry. Yes, Chair. That's correct.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. Any further questions of Mr. Hendry? Okay, thank you, Mr. Hendry. I'll now open the item for discussion. Are there any other questions of either Ms. Abbey or Mr. Noy?
Yeah, sorry.
Councillor Data?
I have a question with regards to, I think, through you, Chair, to the director. The words, sightlines and the facts were stated by Mr. Morrison that they were misrepresented and inaccurate. Now, they are quite strong words. I was wondering if the director would like to respond to that, and also a clarification that the previous speed limit of 60 was used and not the current 50.
Yeah, thank you, through you, Chair. Yes, I suppose the officers have some concerns about the submission that was made by the applicant in relation to sight lines, to the point where we've included a condition within the recommendation that there should be at least a minimum 45-metre sight distance demonstrated, which might require the existing retaining wall structure on the in the road reserve to be modified to achieve that. Specifically, that sight line is to be taken from 2.5 metres back from the curb. And so we've included that condition to ensure that those sight lines meet the council's requirements.
Further, Councillor Dutta?
Thank you.
Alderman Briscoe, then Alderman Barakis.
Thank you, Chair. I know that we're considering a planning application here, but I wonder if Miss Avey or the director can definitively say for the construction of this upgraded right-of-way needs the consent of all the owners of the right-of-way. And as a commentary, I can't imagine that you can upgrade a right-of-way without the permission of all the owners of that right-of-way. So I wonder if we could get clarification. I know we're considering a planning matter here, but to me, that's such a fundamental fact that we should know.
Yes, good question, Alderman Briscoe. Ms. Avey?
The answer to that question is that it's a legal question, and it's difficult for me to give a definitive answer without having dived into all of the specific issues. But my recollection from my previous role as a solicitor is that a person who has the right to use a right-of-way also has the right to upgrade it without the specific consent of the landowner.
That doesn't seem very logical in common law, but however, look, I wonder if we could have a more definitive, I know you in your previous life you were a solicitor, as you just said. I wonder if we could seek legal advice prior to the council meeting if this moves forward from today.
I can certainly arrange that for you, yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Alderman Barakis?
Thank you, Chair. I'm a bit sort of, I don't know if I'm conflicted or if I'm just confused on this one. And it does seem to me, I think, like Alderman Briscoe said, it almost seems like it's less of a planning issue and more of a legal issue. I would have thought that if one of the one of the people that have right of way if they've got the right to develop, then another person with a right of way would equally have the right to leave it as it is or to develop it in another way. So it does sort of, I don't know, it does sort of seem like a confusing situation. I'm not sure if I even have the answer myself on how I'm gonna vote at this point. It does seem like a tough one. It'd be very interesting to see the legal advice. I think from a planning perspective purely, I don't think there's too much of an issue with it. But I think the real issue seems to be from the legal aspect as to who's got the right to do this and whose permission should be granted and who's who's rightfully able to do this and who needs to give permission. So I'm not sure that I'm not sure that there's a clear answer to that right now. So it's a bit difficult. I think purely from a planning perspective, it seems reasonably simple, but from a legal position, it's a tough one because you'd think I would have thought notionally that it'd be something that we'd all have to all the landowners would have to give sort of joint permission to upgrade this together, but it just seems like a bit of a strange one. So look, I'm happy to sort of see how the debate goes and work out what I'm going to do myself.
Thank you. Councillor Harvey.
Yeah, look, it's along the same line of questioning. The applicant for the proposal is Mr. Griggs, not Mr. Hendry. So do you have to have a stake in the game? And does Mr. Griggs have a stake in this laneway or not? And if he doesn't have a stake, then does he still have the same sort of right to put in a proposal to change it?
Mr. Noy?
He does. In fact, I could make an application for this if I notified all the immediate landowners. So Mr. Griggs is entitled under law to lodge such an application.
Okay, but he still would have to notify all of the owners. And what's the purpose of that if it doesn't matter?
Well, the purpose of that is simply to notify all immediate landowners that that you are lodging an application on their land. That's the provisions under LUPA, Land Use Planning Approvals Act, and I don't go to. I mean, that's an issue for the legislators, not for us as humble enforcers of that act.
And with regard to the changing condition at the bottom of the driveway, if there was no application, would the council have had a concern about sight lines and the configuration at the bottom of the driveway?
Look, I think it's fair to say that the officers are have a concern, but have conditioned it to ensure compliance. In fact, may well result in an improvement on the sight lines.
But there would have been no action required if there was no application.
That's correct. That's correct, Chair. There are existing access points, and they have certain existing rights to access via that existing driveway.
And sorry, last question. Can I just clarify the status of the other road that comes in further up Sandy Bay Road towards the city and loops around the back, as I understand? What's the status of that road? What's the purpose of that? Was that to access the properties in question? And I know there's a compliance issue with it, but does that compliance issue go away if this new proposal is agreed? Could you explain the road to me?
Ms. Abe, can you explain the road again, please?
Through you, Chair, the earlier permit includes a condition that access is provided through that road. That permit condition stands and is enforceable unless it's varied. So there is some current enforcement action which requires that right-of-way to be provided to a certain standard. It may well be that there's a subsequent application to vary the conditions of that permit, which would remove those requirements. But the current status is that it's a condition which does require enforcement action.
Any further questions, Councillor Harvey? We don't have a motion as yet, and we do want some more advice. So theoretically, we could defer this. Alderman Barakis, you have your hand up. Did you want to say
I didn't have my hand up, but I think maybe deferral might actually be a safe way to go about this, because I think there is a lot of confusion on this, and it might be best to get some sort of legal advice to clarify if we've got time.
Okay, so we have a motion for deferral, and that's a procedural motion, so that will be deferred till before council, special meeting before council next Monday. Since it's a procedural motion, I'll need to put that, and I'll go around the table, the virtual table. Alderman Briscoe,
I support the deferral.
Councillor Harvey,
No, I don't support the deferral.
Alderman Barakis,
Yes.
Councillor Dutta,
No.
Councillor Coates.
Just can I ask a point of clarification of a chair just prior to voting, or do you need my vote?
Yeah, well, it's sort of in the middle of
Just,
voting, but
if
yeah.
we're deferring to, I mean, my understanding before from Alderman Briscoe was he had requested legal advice prior to next week's council meeting.
Yep.
But if we defer this, it'll just mean that there'll be a meeting then before the council meeting where we'll get the same advice.
Yep, that's right. So do you vote in favour of the deferral?
I would see that extra little meeting in front almost redundant. I'd vote against it, to be honest. Against.
And I vote against it as well. So the procedural motion for deferral is lost. Now, do we have either the motion before us or an alternative motion? Councillor Dutta? Or Scotty? Yep, Councillor Dutta, sorry.
Sorry, I want to foreshadow a motion that we reject this recommendation based on the reason that clause E672P1 has not been satisfied.
Thank you, Councillor Dutta. Just a question: does that carry as a reason for refusal, Mr. Noy? And do we need to worry? We don't need this amendment that's on the memo in that case as well.
Well, I'll go to your last question first. That's correct if it's for refusal. But going to the specifics of the recommendation put by Councillor Dutta, look, I just need to check that. If you just bear with me.
Thank you. What was the clause again, Councillor Dutta?
I think it's clause 672P1 with regards to safety, efficiency, and convenience. And there are a number of sub-tests. Or the other way would be to just vote the recommendation. It might be defeated, that's all. Whichever way is been directed, maybe the advice given by the director.
Yes, through you, Chair. Look, it would appear that notwithstanding the officer's recommendation, if that was the view of the elected members, then that provision could be used to support a refusal. Yes, through you, Chair. So criteria clause 672P provides as follows: design of vehicle access points must be safe, efficient and convenient, having regard to all of the following: avoidance of conflicts between users, including vehicles, cyclists and pedestrians, avoidance of unreasonable interference with flow of traffic in adjoining roads, suitable for the type and volume of traffic likely to be generated by the use of the development, and finally D, ease of accessibility and recognition for users.
Thank you. So we have the motion before us. Is there any discussion?
Yes.
Alderman Briscoe.
Yes, look, I haven't commented about the merits of it. So many people using a right-of-way, even at the moment, why isn't it a road?
Director?
That's the first question.
Well, it's not designated as such on a title, so it's simply not it's not recognised under law, under titles law.
Yes. Okay. So we've got this strange situation where when the road needs upgrade, the right-of-way needs upgrading, then they have to pass around the kitty. It may be that people want to improve it to more of an extent, like this application is. To me, I feel it's hard to make a decision unless we have that legal advice in front of us. And it's sad that the deferral motion was defeated because we haven't got that information. So even if on a planning grounds, the officers have indicated approval, then even if it got approved tonight, the representors would have the comfort to know that they just have to say no, and it doesn't matter whether they've got planning approval or not. So I find it really difficult. I sympathise with the representors, and so in the situation that wasn't deferred, we haven't got legal advice, I have to err on the side of caution, and therefore I'll be supporting a refusal tonight, and hope that legal advice would give some comfort to the representatives, even if it does eventually gets planning approval.
Yeah, thank you, Alderman Briscoe. Good points that you've made. Alderman Barakis, then Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, look, Chair, this is a tough one. I think it does. I suppose time will tell once we do get this this legal advice and see what that says. But this does really seem to me to be more of a legal issue as to the right of way than it does a planning issue. And I suppose pending the advice coming to council, I'm going to have to err on siding with the recommendations from the officers, and reluctantly though, I think it is a tough one, and not rule out possibly changing my opinion depending on what the legal advice says or what happens over the course of the week. But it is a tough one, but I suppose we'll have to wait and see what happens in the week.
Thank you. Councillor Harvey, and then Councillor Dutta.
Thanks, Chair. So just to clarify, that legal advice will still be forthcoming before council meeting next Monday. I didn't support the deferral because I didn't think we needed another meeting to go over the same ground, but happy to see that legal advice prior to the meeting next Monday, where, you know, if anyone is inclined to change their mind, that legal advice might have a bearing. But it sounds like it's a civil matter between the owners of the land, if that's my interpretation from the officer. But anyway, look, I'll be supporting the foreshadowed motion for refusal that Councillor Dutta is putting.
Thank you. Councillor Dutta.
Thank you, Chair. For me, there are 2 points. Point number one is the legal issue, and I take it that is not our particular domain. The second point I make is that our decision is based on a planning issue, a planning matter, and therefore clause 672 P1 satisfies that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, if there's no further discussion, Councillor Coates.
Thank you, Chair. Look, I won't cover the same ground as thing is, other than just to note for the benefit of the meeting, I guess this inevitably will come up next Monday with some advice. As with all legal advice, I guess we might end up with 4 different lawyers, 4 different bits of advice coming before us from various parties. But look, I guess I'd just highlight, obviously there's multiple parties that have properties on this right of way. You know, I would encourage you, if you haven't done so together, but look, we as a planning tribunal, we may not be able to come up with a solution depending on what advice comes before us. So I guess flag that for the respondents and the applicant.
Thank you. Yes, and it's always good if parties can talk and work through this, but obviously there's quite a bit of history over the time. Yes, so I'll put the motion for refusal, and I'll go around the room, virtual room. So I'll start with you again, Alderman Briscoe.
I support the motion for refusal.
Thank you. Councillor Harvey.
Support.
Alderman Barakis.
Against.
Councillor Dutta. Take yourself off mute, Councillor Dutta, please. Councillor Dutta, come back. I'm not quite sure. We'll go to the Councillor Coates. I don't know what's happened there.
I'll go against.
Okay, and I'll vote in favour. So we have, what's the vote? We haven't got Councillor Dutta voting for some reason. I'm not sure what's happened there.
You still have a call.
But what was the vote, David?
The current vote is 3-2, Chair.
So it was...
In support, Councillor Dutta's back.
Right. Okay. Sorry, Councillor Dutta, can you take yourself off mute, please, for this vote?
If he's struggling, I believe Craig, as a host, can actually unmute him.
I don't think you can hear you.
Mm-hmm. Craig, can you unmute him?
I can only request
Okay,
it.
thank you. I've got it now.
Yeah, he's got it now.
I got it. Yes.
So you're going to vote? Yep. Okay. All right.
Sorry about the problems.
Yep. So that is carried. So we'll go to full council next Monday, and we'll have that legal advice. But essentially, it's refused at this point. Thank you. We now go to the supplementary item number 1214 Byron Street, Sandy Bay. Is Mr. Ivan Dufour still here, Craig?
Letting him in now.
Thank you. Welcome, Mr. Dufour. You have 5 minutes to address the committee of your concern. So if you take yourself off mute and fire away. Thank you. You'll need to take yourself off mute. Yep, thank you. That's it.
Can you hear me?
Not really clearly. Just try again.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, that's good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, thank you for giving me the opportunity to present, to make a representation. That's the first thing. The second thing I'd like to just point out is that in the process of trying to find more information about the development, I contacted the council or the officer who's in charge of the development, so to speak, and I was simply unable to talk to her. Nothing to do with the person. I think she was ill or unable to attend, so I haven't had an opportunity to ask a great deal of questions. So if I repeat something which has been dealt with behind the scene, so to speak, I apologize for that. Really, the point of my representation is the main thing is one of access. The access from the street, the bottom of Arina Place, to the back of the site, the entrance into the right-of-way. This is an issue that I think is addressed to some extent, but I think according to the plans that we have, really indicates it's awfully tight, very, very tight. The other issue that we have is that because Arina Place and Star Street are such narrow streets, there will be increase in motor vehicle traffic. It's very likely that there will be demand for street parking on the assumption that we have at least 13 or more residents in the boarding house, and which means that really it's affecting the parking space in Arina Place, and by domino effect, it will also affect the parking space in Star Street and so on. So this is really our main concerns. Another concern that I raised with those aldermen who visited the site is the proposed surfacing of the right-of-way to the bottom boundary of the development, which mean that there's nothing I can see in the plans which deals with stormwater. How will that be dealt with? I just want to point out that our residence, which is obviously next to the right-of-way, is an old residence dating 1823, and the foundations are not the best by today's standards, and we really need to ensure that there is no runoff on our side of the right-of-way, in effect. So basically, these are really the main issues that I have. There are other things that are raised with individual councillors, but I think that they're really not the major issues at this stage. I believe that access is.
Thank you very much. Now, do we have any questions of Mr. Dufour? Alderman Briscoe, you can start.
Yes, I had the good fortune to go on site, Chairman, so if this was approved, which I suggest that we might have to do some changes if it gets approved, you would, this is saying if it gets approved, you would suggest that the driveway was sloping away from your land, so that there wouldn't be any problems of water going into the foundations of your old house in the corner there.
I presume this is an option, yes, but I would have thought that another option is to have some sort of connecting drain on that side, right, to be then directed wherever there's a suitable stormwater line.
Okay, so we'll see how the discussion goes, but we would probably put a condition, if it does get approval tonight, a condition that suitable drainage for that right of way is approved, subject to the Director of Planning. But presumably, just on, I don't know whether you have access to the report, but there's a page 22 of our officer report. Does indicate that there's even a car that's blocking the right of way already. And when I was there on Sunday, I think it was Sunday, another car was blocking the right of way. Is that a common occurrence, that right of way is blocked regularly?
Well, this is what is happening during the day. The car that you saw, or the second car, which is jutting out from the adjacent property, is one of the owner's cars. And so if they want to go in their house and out again within the next 10 or 15 minutes or hour, they park the car there because it's convenient. Otherwise, if we happen to be where we are and our car is in front of our own house, they have to go and park at the other end of their own place. And this is what I'm referring to when I'm talking about access and parking difficulties.
Sorry to dominate. Just one more question, Chair. So I think from the discussion, I think it was Saturday, not Sunday, we met. You are not objecting to the development as such, although you have got concerns of a boarding house with only 2 bathrooms. Is the access, if we deleted the car parking, one space car park at the rear of the applicant's property, that would be another way to address your issues, I imagine.
That it's one or 2 cars, access to the way the cars are proposed to be parked on the property is still difficult, but not obviously, well, there's one less car. Now, I don't know at all if that is in line with what the requirements, parking requirements when we have a building house with 13 people living in there. That's something I can't tell you.
Okay, that's a question we'll ask the Director at the end after the deputations. Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks, Alderman Briscoe. Councillor Harvey.
Hi, could you explain how the laneway is currently used? I visited it over the weekend and had a wander around down the laneway. Does anyone use the laneway at all currently? The houses further down the laneway itself?
No. If we walk down the laneway, you will see that I have a gate which is 300. I use the laneway probably once or twice a year, and I left a gate there just in case of an emergency to be accessing the bottom of my property. Otherwise, no one uses it. No vehicles goes down there at all.
So if this development goes ahead, that access will be, it'll be hardened, it will have a hard surface and become a paved laneway to the extent of this new proposal.
I think that, yes, it will. I think that the drawings call, it's proposed that the laneway will be resurfaced to the bottom, to the end, the boundary of the property being developed, yes. And that also raises another issue, is that once the right-of-way has been surfaced, whatever the surface is, well, there's a very good chance that the property next to that, further south, so to speak, which is also a rental property, they would perhaps want to have access to the backyard to park their car there. That's something which obviously is quite possible.
And just your understanding of how these bedrooms will be accessed, is it your understanding that everybody will access them via the street you're on or via the Byron Street? So I'm assuming not those cars, but from a foot traffic perspective, will people be able to access the rear boarding house via the front yards, do you think, of the Byron Street property?
Well, human nature being as it is, we always try to take the shortest route, aren't we? So I assume that the resident there are likely to be uni students. And on the assumption that they walk to university, it's easier to walk from the back of the property through Arana Place, Fitzroy Place, down Regent, than going up Byron Street and then all along Fitzroy Place down Regent. That would be what I do.
Any further questions, Councillor Harvey?
Just the last one. So from your observations, because I'm quite familiar with this property and I think it's been a rental property for a number of years.
Yes.
Do people already use the rear exit? Do they walk through the jungle out the back to access Arena Street?
No, they can't at the moment because it's a jungle. They can't. You could walk through there, but before that, there were people who lived that, and they were using Arena Place. One person in particular who lived at the back of that property, who would use Arena Place to access their place. Yes.
Alderman Briscoe, do you have other questions?
Sorry, Deputy Lord Mayor, I don't.
Okay, all right, thank you. Mr. Dufour, I think most of my questions have been answered and I wait for advice on the stormwater as well. So thank you. We don't have the applicant here, so we don't have any questions from the applicant. So I'll open the item for discussion. Alderman Briscoe.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. This development probably doesn't require so much car parking. It's a question I was going to ask the Director earlier today, but we didn't get into communication. I wonder if I could ask the Director, if we deleted the car parking from this right of way, have we got discretion to do that?
Director?
Just bear with me.
Look, I'm going to ask an easier question for the team.
Yeah, no, look, I'm just wondering whether it's tantamount to refusal because it's not an insignificant component of the application. There is a discretion associated with the car parking under the acceptable solutions of the scheme. 5 car parking spaces are required. 4 are being provided. So you reduce that by a further 2 spaces. That's you're increasing your discretion by a fairly significant amount. So I suppose I would be cautious about such a condition under those circumstances.
I wonder if I could ask a supplementary question Debbie.
Go ahead.
The current car parking arrangement is the whole of the front of that Byron Street property is paved, and I presume it can have more than 3 or 4 cars there at the present moment. So is it possible to have condition it that the parking is at the front of the property? That's the first question.
Yeah, look, it's my understanding that that may not be supported under the heritage grounds. I mean, there's 3 spaces I understand at the front at the moment, or capacity for 3. The proposal currently before council, the proposal currently before council is in fact to enhance that frontage, which we would, as officers, support. Because of the heritage precinct, it will reinstate the traditional front garden treatment, and something that we think is worthy of support.
And thank you. The second part of the question is that I wonder if any of our officers, our planning officers, have actually visited the site to see whether it is possible to get a car around that corner. It's a very, very sharp 90 degrees, and there is theoretical drawings. However, I wonder if, firstly, are the officers aware of the very tight nature of that street? I parked my car on the street, and it took me 5 to 10 minutes just to turn it around. I shouldn't have parked in that street. I should have parked out at Fitzroy Gardens and walked in. So here we are having a potential development of 2 more cars to use that, and visitors presumably will try and park in that small street. And as the representative in his delegation, the deputation said that there's potential of more development from that right of way. Are they aware of the constraints?
Look, I think the photograph on page 21 indicates attendance of a council officer in that location. So yes, the council officer did attend the site. I should point out that that right-of-way exists at the moment, and the owner of that property could exercise that right now. So I think that regardless of this application, so I think that that's an important reminder that those rights exist, that the owner of that property could access over that right-of-way, could form the driveway perfectly within their rights to do so, and use that. But from the officer's advice, from our engineer's advice, access is possible over that right-of-way for a vehicle. And in fact, the configuration would and is required to allow a vehicle to turn on site, so there's no need to reverse out of the site.
A lot of things are possible. Can I just say, comment? A lot of things are possible. However, I don't think anyone would use that right away at the present moment unless they had a 4-wheel drive vehicle. But to get a 4-wheel drive vehicle around that corner would be a tremendous engineering feat. And also to use the property of the subject of this application, there's a drop because there's a sandstone wall there. There's a drop. You couldn't use it. You could not drive onto the property as present. So whilst it's theoretically possible, it's not a reality at the moment. Thank you.
Did you want to ask a question around stormwater, Alderman Briscoe, or are you happy for Mr. Noy to answer that?
Well, if the committee is of the mind to approve this, can we condition it to say that stormwater has to be to the satisfaction of you? Because obviously the Heritage Building 1823 building there, as the representative said, is probably just sitting on the rock and isn't 100% 2020 type engineering.
Yeah, look, thank you, Chair. There is a condition on the within the recommendation, engineering stormwater 1 that requires the capture of any stormwater on the new hard surfaces to be captured and connected into the reticulated stormwater system. So that concern, while a valid one, is addressed via that condition and would overcome those concerns.
Yeah, I had some concerns around that because just the lay of the land seems to go down to number 10 quite. Yeah, so whether that would have any impact on number 10 or 8 Byron Street.
No, look, it's a requirement that there shouldn't be any concentration of stormwater from the proposed development on adjacent properties, and that's why that condition is included. So any new hard stand areas their stormwater will be captured and will be connected to the existing reticulated stormwater system. So standard condition.
Thank you. Councillor Coates.
Thank you, Chair. And look, thank you for discussion so far. I guess I've got a few questions for you, Chair, to the Director, just to make sure I've got my head around it correctly. I also went and saw the site, and I agree with Alderman Briscoe's comments in regards to the right-of-way. I think he is obviously an amazing car parker, and it even took him about 5 turns to get out. So look, that said, though, I think obviously there is a right-of-way. That property has it on its title, and if we were doing it today, it may well not be there, but we've got to deal with what is as opposed to what could be. Look, I do have 2 concerns really with this application. The first one is in regards to the number of parking that is available under this plan. And I guess the proposal we have before us is putting out 4, but it is for a development of 13 rooms, which is not enough parks to be automatically approved. And look, I've seen it over time where stuff is getting through without adequate parking provided and provisioned, which essentially just means everyone's suburbs becomes a parking lot. So I have some real concerns about that, and I've got a few questions in regards to access to the front. The second one is in regards to the site coverage. So I'll get to that in a little bit, but to start with a number of parks. Director, on the plan, we've got 2 spots dedicated at the front and 2 spots dedicated at the back. And it's noted in a report from the officers that they're relying on a performance criteria because they've got access to buses on Sandy Bay Road. But in a real sense, this development, we're showing the 2 and a 2. Why would they not have put extra parking at the front? I mean, you even mentioned before, I think that there is space for 3, but to my mind, why wouldn't they ensure it does get approved on those grounds?
Director?
Well, that's a matter for the applicant. I'm just not in a position to fully understand the details of the design brief, other than to say that I repeat what I've indicated before, that there clearly is an intention to address the issues of the current car parking arrangement, where you have a fairly unsympathetic street frontage to this heritage precinct of a paved car parking area. Now, that's not something that these heritage precincts should be promoted, and there should be every effort to, in fact, repair that where it's practical to do so. And I think the applicant has sought to do that in this case.
Yep. And the second one is regards to site coverage. Look, I was reading through the report, and it says it's got, the site itself is 625 square metres, total floor area is 311 square metres, visit point 7.3, page 39. And so it's getting to 49.7% coverage. And then it says, well, coverage is considered enclosed space, so it's got a roof over it. But the actual proposed new building is so close to the one behind that it's created a sliver, if you like, of land, but I guess arguably isn't enclosed. But to my mind, it is enclosed. It's part of a development. You know, I'm looking at it, and if you were to sit on the block above and look down, and you said, "Oh, look at all the land. There's your 50% site that's not covered." You know, watch the shadowy place over there, and you'd say, "Oh, that's not part of the land. That's just part of the buildings." I guess my question is around that. When they assess this, do they only look at the floor coverage sitting on the actual plan as approved? Because, I mean, when I was looking at the Attachment B, the site, page 83, what's got the shade report, I mean, that tiny little, you wouldn't even know that it wasn't part of the building. And so I guess when it comes to the site coverage, if in fact this had been just above that 50% as opposed to 49.7, would this then have been recommended for refusal because of that?
Well, firstly, the area, the site coverage is determined by the roofed area. So that's the definition under the planning scheme that we are legally obliged to adhere to. So it's hypothetical whether, well, it's not relevant. If it's unroofed, it's then it's not part of the site coverage. So we've got to abide by the definition under the scheme. And coming to the question of if it was over the 50%, would that result in a different recommendation? Well, I can't speculate on that. We haven't assessed it, those performance criteria, so I haven't got a position one way or the other because we haven't done that exercise.
Cool, thank you.
All right, do we have any further questions? Or we have a motion before us. Alderman Briscoe, do you have your hand up to move a motion?
No, I haven't.
Councillor Harvey.
Yeah, look, a couple of other points I'd like to raise. Firstly, what's the parking on the street situation around the area? Is it permit parking only? Or is it limited to time, like 1 hour, 2 hour? So I'm assuming that if there were 13 people that had 13 cars, they would all struggle to park it anywhere in the area because it would be, you know, only resident parking and limited hour parking. So that's a disincentive, hopefully, for people not to have cars because it doesn't make sense. The second part is with regard to encouraging bike use. Do you need facilities at boarding houses to accommodate bicycles? And the third part is with regard to rubbish bins. Will all rubbish be collected from Byron Street, or will there be rubbish collected from both Byron and from the rear of the property?
Mr. Noy.
Firstly, there is a residential parking scheme within the area, as I understand it. So there'd be limitations on residential parking permits under this. So not all residents would be able to gain a residential parking permit, as I understand.
All right, just to jump in there. So when you say not all would be able to get parking permits, does that mean people from either side? Because is the whole project a boarding house or just the rear project?
No, the whole site is a boarding house. So there's 13 bedrooms in total. In relation to
parking permits.
Sorry?
So they wouldn't be eligible for parking permits?
It's my understanding that they wouldn't, but I can clarify that for you before council. In relation to your second question, the bicycle parking, under boarding house arrangements, you're not required to provide on-site bicycle parking to satisfy the scheme, although given that there is land area, outdoor land area there, I'm sure that the facilities could be made available on site should there be a demand for that. And sorry, the third question?
With
Bins,
regard to collection of rubbish, both
yeah,
the street and the rear.
Yeah, no, look, I think the bin collection would still be from Byron Street, given that that's we know the access constraints from the rear.
Councillor Dutta.
Chair, I would want to move a motion if you think it's appropriate.
Yes, please do.
I would move that we refuse this and the reason is under clause 661 and 672 with regards to parking demand, etc. There are a number of sub-tests under those clauses.
Thank you. So we have a motion for refusal in relation to parking mainly. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. Discussion. Alderman Briscoe.
Question. Thank you, Chair. Another question occurred to me. 13 bedrooms. Presumably you could have double beds in each room, possibly 26 or more. Is there any standard for the number of bathrooms for you, Chair, to the Director?
Look, in relation to the number of people that can occupy the boarding house, it's conditioned to be limited to 13. And in relation to the number of bathrooms for boarding house, I'm not aware of any standard, but again, I'm happy to have that clarified. And it would be under the building regulations. It wouldn't be something under the planning scheme that I'm aware of that denotes a requirement for a certain number of bathrooms per bedroom. But I can have that checked for the purposes of the building regulations.
And it looks like there are 3 bathrooms rather than 2 bathrooms, which I think Mr. Dufour had thought there had been. So there are 3 for the full dwelling.
Even if there were 3, Chair, 3 to 13 residents is extraordinarily low. Yeah.
Okay, further discussion. Councillor Harvey and Councillor Coates.
Director, in order to comply with the parking, how many bedrooms would need to be deleted? I know that would be tantamount to refusal, but if another application came forward that complied with a parking potential, or if there was, what's the ratio of bedrooms to cars that would be required if the number of bedrooms was reduced to, say, I don't know.
Director?
Yeah, it's one. Yeah, so the requirement is 1 space for every staff member and 1 space per 3 licensed residents. So given that there's no staff members on site, you need to reduce the number of beds by 1 for the proposal to be compliant.
Further comment, Councillor Harvey, or we go over to Councillor Coates?
No, I thought it would be bigger than that.
Okay, Councillor Coates.
Thank you, Chair. And look, not wanting to be pedantic about this, just making sure I understand it correctly. Now, I guess the easiest image, I think, is probably page 94, attachment B, where it shows the side view of the house. And this is a question through to the Director, through you, Chair, if that's okay. Back to my previous comments in regards to the site coverage, we're showing the south elevation here, and you can see on the existing property, the actual roof extends over, if you like, the building, as a lot do. And I mean, you can see it virtually covers that bit of land in between. I just want to confirm when they do those site things, it's purely looking at from the, so that 97.3 is on the roof, not on the actual site of the buildings or size of the building. Sorry.
Director?
Yes, it's any roofed area is the definition. And the calculations that the officers have done and on the evidence that's been presented is that it's compliant.
Thank you.
Okay, look, I think we've had plenty of discussion around this. I too have concerns around that rear access. I think it's too unbelievable to be true, really. And obviously there were concerns raised by representatives other than Mr. Dufour in relation to other matters around access to the right of way, parking and so forth. So without further ado, I might put the motion that we have before us from Councillor Dutta, motion for refusal. So I'll go around the room. How do you vote, Alderman Briscoe?
Sadly, I support the motion for refusal.
Councillor Harvey?
Same, yeah, I support.
Alderman Barakis?
Against, Chair.
Councillor Dutta?
For.
Councillor Coates?
For.
And I vote for the motion for refusal. So that's carried, and that will go to council next week, Mr. Dufour, as a motion for refusal. Thank you. Now, committee, are you wanting to have a break, or we have only about 4 fairly uncontentious items to come before us? Are you happy to plough through? Yep.
Yes.
Okay.
If someone wants to break.
All right. Thank you. All right. So we go now to 7.1.3, which is 18 to 24 Letitia Street. It's a motion for an industrial site to become 8 residential apartments. Who'd like to move that? Councillor Harvey.
Yep. Happy to move it. This is adding value to a block of land in a flat area. I don't see it as being very contentious, and I think it's a good outcome. Hopefully, the finish will be adequate. Yeah, so these ones are far easier to agree to.
Thank you. Further discussion? If not, I'll put. Is there any dissent in relation to this one, which I think is a really good development, really well designed. And the conditions have some of the original fabric in the design as well. So if there's no dissent, I'll declare that carried unanimously. Item 7.1.4 is 8 Manalo Avenue, West Hobart. So this is another application. Jill, who was first to get there? Alderman Barakis.
I'm happy to move that, Chair. I think it's pretty self-explanatory, so happy to just move that.
Thank you. Discussion? If there's no discussion, I think the planning officers have worked really hard to try and improve this. It doesn't satisfy all the representatives, all the 3 representatives, even though it's reduced in bulk quite a lot. But is there any dissent to that? If not, I'll declare that carried. 15 Murrayville Esplanade, Sandy Bay. Councillor Alderman Barakis, you happy to move that one as well?
I'm happy to. I think Alderman Briscoe had his hand up as well, but I'm happy to move it.
Okay, maybe you can move the next one. Okay, any discussion? No discussion, any dissent? If not, I'll declare that carried. We go now to reports. 8.1 delegated decisions report. Alderman Briscoe, do you want to move that? Okay, all right, thank you. Any discussion? No discussion. Any dissent? If there's no dissent, I'll declare that carried. We'll just go to item 13 on the SUP, which is the City Planning Advertising Report. Alderman Barakis.
Happy to move that for discussion, Chair.
Yep. Any questions there? Any specifics that we should know about?
There are a couple of items which are already indicated as being considered by the council, one of which are some works at the North Hobart Oval, and the other is a matter which it has arisen through enforcement action. Otherwise, they're relatively standard applications. The enforcement is 73 View Street.
All right. Is there any dissent? So move that, declare that carried. Move back to the item 9, which is responses to questions without notice. Alderman Barakis, you've got your hand up permanently. Happy to move that one?
Sure. Apologies.
Excellent. I like man on the move. All right. There's no discussion. So any dissent? No dissent. We'll declare that carried. Item 10 is questions without notice. Any questions without notice?
I do, Chair.
Oh, I thought your hand was just up there permanently.
I put it down and then put it back up again this time.
Okay, far away.
For the sake of deliberating. Just a couple for the director. The first one is, in light of recent public commentary in regards to building approvals in the 2019-20 financial year, can the director advise what the total value of development applications that were refused by council in the 2019-2020 financial year? I imagine you'll have to take that one on notice, but.
Yeah, look, I'll take that one on notice.
Thank you. And the second one's probably another one you'll have to take on notice. In regards to the planning scheme amendments, PSA 19.1, which I think are coming in reasonably soon. I think they were approved by council last year. When exactly are they expected to formally come into effect? And secondly, would the amendments that are coming into effect have made the would have made approval more difficult for development applications that have recently been approved and constructed, such as the Batch House Apartments, Motor, or the Melville Street development applications?
Director?
I'll take that one on notice as well, Chair.
Thank you very much. And I can send them to you if it makes it easier. Yep.
Yep, that would be
Thanks.
appreciated.
Send them to David as well, if you wouldn't mind. Yep. Okay, Councillor Harvey.
Thanks, Chair. My question relates to boarding houses. And I'd like to know how many boarding house applications there has been over the last, I don't know, say this year, because it seems that we're getting a few of them now. And are there any emerging issues with boarding houses that we should be getting ahead of from a planning perspective?
Director?
I'll take that one on notice, Chair.
But we are getting some information back, aren't we, in relation to boarding houses?
Yeah, look, I think it has raised its head on more than one occasion, and Councillor Harvey is obviously alluding to that. So we'll provide a response.
Thank you. Alderman Briscoe? Just take yourself off mute, Alderman Briscoe.
Sorry about that. I know where the button. Thank you. Look, 2 years ago, when we deferred the decision on heights, or we had the great argument was the part of the precinct study, we would get a fairly rapid turnover of the height aspect. So the question is to the director. My prediction at the time was it wasn't going to be a year as it was told to us. It wasn't going to be 2 years. It would be 4 years before anything came back to us. Anyway, what is the anticipated date of the part of the report to do with the heights of the city to be arrive at council?
Okay.
Yeah, look, I'll provide a written response to that, but there has been some memo go out to Alderman or update, I think, in relation to the precincts plan, but I'm happy to have that circulated and specifically respond to the question that you raise in relation to the heights issue.
Okay, so we'll move to item 11, which is moving into the close. Can I have somebody move that, please?
So
Alderman Briscoe, thank you. No dissent, good. Okay, so Craig, could you stop the recording, please?